Hello everyone, and welcome to the webinar of the June 2022 release of HelloID. Due to the holidays, the setup of this webinar will be a bit different compared to the previous webinars. The service automation and provisioning experts will discuss the newly added features. If you have any questions, please ask them in the live chat and we will answer them as soon as possible. Let's start with the newly added features for the service automation domain. We will start by demonstrating the creation of a HelloID incident after a delegated form task fails. This feature was already available using the old delegated form tasks. But now, this feature is also available for the new delegated form tasks running on the service automation agent. So whenever a delegated form gets submitted and the executed task fails, for whatever reason, a new HelloID incident will be created to notify you that something went wrong. To show you in the demo, I've imported the default template ID account create from our GitHub repository. I've changed some of the scripting, so in general the form and the scripting is working, but if everything works out, then we generate an error and we can see the new incident. And just to confirm, when I navigate to the admin dashboard, I can see I have no open incidents at this moment. So let's switch to the service desk front end and we will fill in some details in this form. So we will create an employee and we call it release demo, department IT, job title manager, for example. Account doesn't expire and we'll enter a password. Then we go to the next page and then we'll see the available name. It checks it in the Active Directory and it uses the configured naming convention and it generates this name. So I will select the name and I will continue to the summary page. I can confirm all my details and I will submit the form. So now the form is submitted and the agent will execute the PowerShell script and we can go back to the admin panel of HelloID to see the results of this activity. So let's go to the activity overview. And we will see that our latest activity is from our form, ID account create new. So this is the newly imported form. It has been submitted, but it has failed. I can now go to the dashboard. And here we can see that the task of ID account create new has failed. We can click on the details to see a little bit more details. It was opened, last modified date, and we can click on this link to directly go to the activity page and open the panel where we can see the data source logging and the form submission logging. So now you'll have the ability to be notified when the task fails using the HelloID incident, and you can open the details of the incident and click on the link to directly navigate and route to the page for the submission logging. So here we can click on the logging. We have our audit messages. So we can see that we have created the account successfully, but the membership failed. It tried to add the group test group 1 to the account, but the group could not be found. And that's correctly because this group does not exist in the Active Directory. We can also go to the task logging, and here we see basically the same information. The expiry date was empty. Account has been created successfully, but there's an error message that it could not add the group to the user because it could not be found in the Active Directory. So that's nice. So what we can do, what you would do now in general is go back to the scripting, fix the scripting, or create the group in the Active Directory. So let's do that. We will copy this group. I will quickly switch back to my other screen and I will create this group inside my Active Directory. Test group number 1, and I will click on OK to create a group. So now the group does exist. What I could do is just now retry this task. My script has been prepared to retry it, so it will check for the account. It will find the account, so it will not recreate it. It will not generate an error because the account already exists, but it will use that account and try to get the membership fixed. You can see now it has been submitted. There's no error anymore. I can see it has been submitted before with an error. It has been retried and there was no errors anymore. Also in the task logging, there is no errors. And you can see we now successfully added the test group number 1 to the user. And in the audit logging, we can see that the account already exists. And we have a successful audit message that we have added the group to the user. So that all went right. And if we're lucky, you will see that the instance is already closed automatically because the script now has run successfully. So to summarize, the instance will be created whenever the task fails. But if you retry the task or if you do a new submission of the same form, that submission is successfully, the incident will be closed because of the successful run of the script. Okay, then we will switch back to the form itself and show you another feature of this release. Go to edit, go to the form itself. Behind this grid of the naming convention is a data source configured, and that data source will generate the available names. We've changed one small thing on the data source input. And now you cannot configure anymore the option that you can say this input is configurable in form yes or no. It's always configurable in form from this release on. Before, if you did not have that option enabled, you could configure hard-coded values or static values in this window, but that didn't make any sense and wasn't used, because if you would like to use static values or hard-coded values, you could just easily write it in your script itself and not in this page anymore. So we've removed it from the UI. It's still available and still working from the already configured data sources, but for new data sources, you cannot configure this option anymore. And last but not least, we've also added some new API endpoints in this release. API endpoints for product assignment to a user. These endpoints are more flexible compared to the already existing endpoints for these actions. These new endpoints for product assignment, you can configure if you assign a product to a user, whether you want to run the product actions. So when you assign a product, you can configure, do you want to run the actions at the approved state, yes or no? And whenever you remove a product from a user, so you delete the assignment, then you can also configure in the API call if you would like to run the actions on the return state, yes or no. So you're more flexible about the product assignments and the task runnings, yes or no. This was the final feature for service automation. We will now continue the webinar with the new features of HelloID provisioning.
The following provisioning features will be demoed in this webinar. The option to disable a target system. With this feature, we now have introduced the ability to easily disable a target system. This can be very helpful in case of maintenance, testing, or whenever the processing of a particular target system needs to be temporarily suspended. Another feature I'd like to demo is the primary contract with null support on end date. When a contract doesn't have an end date specified, for example, in case of an indefinite contract, HelloID will now handle the sorting of multiple contracts as being applied in the primary contract calculation in the correct way, especially in case of a descending ordering on a null date field. Please feel free to ask your questions in the live chat. For target systems, we now have the option to disable it from the General tab, in which we introduced a new toggle to disable or enable any target system. Once a target system is disabled, some other UI components will change also. As you can see on the Layout tab of target systems, we have a grayed out system tile for one of the disabled systems. You can also see a new indicator on top, which will represent that the system is disabled and no new actions for this system will be started. With this introduction of disabling a system, we also modified the layout of this screen a little bit, and that's that we have the ordering of systems being changed based on the state. So first of all, we start by representing all the active systems, Active Directory in this case, followed by all the other systems which are in disabled state. Now once we go to a business rule and we open up the configuration of a rule, a specific rule which contains entitlements of this particular system, you would notice that there is also an indicator for the entitlements coming from the system has been disabled before. This will also affect the entitlement screen. So for the granted entitlements, you will see there are entitlements which are currently in a disabled state. And this will also affect the block, the action, and the history tab. In the history tab, something else has changed. Because of a disabled entitlement, we also disable the option to retry the process for this type of entitlement. So you cannot retry the entitlement of a disabled system. It's also working for a person in which the entitlement screen has some particular entitlements which could be triggered by the retry or regrant of an entitlement. Before you could choose an action from this drop-down list, but because of the entitlements being disabled, this is also not possible because of the disabled state. When a system is disabled, you still have the ability to manage the entitlements from a business rule. So for example, if I go to the entitlement configuration and select the disabled system, I would still be able to select to add or remove configured entitlements from the business rule selection. A remark on this one is that the changes will not be visible as they're being filtered out from the evaluation or enforcement report. Another feature we introduced with this release is the primary contract with null support on end date. As you go to the primary contract configuration, you could see these fields can be sorted in ascending or descending order. In case a contract doesn't have an end date specified, for example in case of indefinite contract, HelloID will now handle the sorting of multiple contracts as being applied in a primary contract calculation the correct way. In case a descending ordering on null date fields is being applied. Another remark on this release is that we also did some changes in mapping which are related to the upcoming 30,000 person support. Most of them are not visible from the UI, but some of them do. Once we take a closer look at a source system, you could see on the contract tab, when we run a preview for a person, we now introduced a new feature to browse between multiple contracts. This has been changed to the contract tab and it's not visible anymore from the person screen. So in the person preview, the contracts have been removed. We have now reached the end of this webinar. For the full list of our features and release notes, please visit roadmap.hellod.com. Thank you for watching this webinar. See you next time.